Cruising Sunset Boulevard in a convertible wasn't just about the car. It was the warm air, the neon signs, the radio playing doo-wop, and the feeling that anything could happen. You didn't drive to get somewhere. You drove to be seen, to flirt at stoplights, and to make sure the night never really ended. The San Fernando Valley hills sat like a painted backdrop behind the glowing screen at the drive-in. You pull in with a car full of cousins, crack the speaker window, and unwrap sandwiches from home. It didn't matter what movie was on. It was the fog on the screen and the stars overhead that stayed with you. When Disneyland opened in 1955, it was like stepping through the TV into another world. Clean streets, smiling workers, and rides that felt like flying. Families drove in from hours away just to see the castle. You kept your ticket stubs like souvenirs and told your friends you met Mickey Mouse in real life. Orange groves once stretched where strip malls sit now. You'd run barefoot between rows, the earth hot under your feet, picking the sweetest one you could reach and wiping it on your shirt. The smell was sharp, fresh, and everywhere. Back then, California didn't just grow oranges. It smelled like them, too. The first In-N-Out in Baldwin Park looked like a shack with a sign, but that 2-lane drive-thru turned out burgers that felt like magic. The smell hit you before the paper bag did. There were no dining rooms, no frozen patties, just fresh, fast, and local. People lined up like it was already a legend. Malibu's First Point drew surfers like bees to a soda bottle. Even if you couldn't balance on a board, you watched. Tanned kids in cutoffs, boards like boats, and waves that seemed endless. Nobody talked much. You just waited for the next set and cheered when someone rode it all the way in. After the war, California filled up fast. Families moved into brand-new ranch houses where bean fields used to be. Everything smelled like fresh paint and lawn seed. The neighbors all had kids, and everyone left their doors unlocked. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like the future. Clean, safe, and yours. Car dealerships along Sunset Strip lit up like carnivals at night. Neon everywhere. You'd press your nose to the glass and pick out the car you'd buy someday, usually a candy apple Chevy with white walls. Salesmen wore suits. The showroom smelled like new leather and promises. Even looking felt like a big deal. Driving across the Golden Gate Bridge early in the morning, fog wrapped around you like a movie set. It was silent, except for the hum of tires on steel. You'd roll down the window, stick your head out, and feel the cold air hit. The whole thing felt impossibly big, and somehow just for you. Before it became roller coasters and tourists, Knott's Berry Farm was a quiet patch of chickens, fried chicken, and boysenberry jam. Your class trip meant paper hats, homemade pie, and watching old men pan for gold. The dirt was real, the ghosts were fake, and you came home with a sticky face and a plastic nugget. The red Pacific electric streetcars clanged through downtown like metal dinosaurs. You'd hop on with your mom and sway side to side as the city passed by. The benches were hard, the ride was loud, and no one minded. They disappeared by the early 60s, but for a while they ruled the rails. Flatbed trucks hauling palm trees looked like something out of a sci-fi film. Perfect, tall, already grown palms, headed straight for some movie-set driveway. You'd watch them roll by and wonder how much they cost. In California, even the trees had to look like stars. At Alta, Dena's new drive-through dairy in 1951, you didn't get out of the car. You just pulled up, said milk and eggs, and someone handed them through the window, like fast food. It felt fancy, modern. Your mom would say, "Only in California," and drive off like she was in a commercial. The Hollywoodland sign had been crumbling for years. By the time the land came down in 1949, it wasn't news, but people still talked. Some missed the full name, others said shorter was better. When news broke that James Dean had died in a crash near Cholame, it hit like a lightning bolt. He was young, wild, and seemed invincible. Kids clipped photos from the paper. Girls cried. Boys tried to act like they didn't care. But every one of them drove slower for at least a week. The Long Beach Naval Shipyard never slept. Sparks flew day and night, welding hulls and history. You knew someone, cousin, uncle, neighbor, who clocked in there. Cold War tension hummed louder than the machines. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. The kind of job you could raise a family on. Santa Maria-style barbecue wasn't just dinner. It was a ritual. Tri-tip over red oak, smoke curling through the park. You waited with a paper plate while grown-ups talked about rubs like they were trade secrets. No sauces, no shortcuts. Just beef, fire, and bragging rights. You didn't need a restaurant, just someone's uncle and a pit. Twin Lakes in Santa Cruz meant sandy feet, scratchy towels, and beach blanket radios. You'd lie there with your eyes closed while the platter sang, "Only You," and the sun baked the backs of your knees, even if you didn't swim. Even if the water was freezing, it still felt like the perfect day. San Francisco fog had a mind of its own. One minute you'd be hanging laundry, the next it was all damp again. Moms cursed it, kids loved it. You could watch it roll in from the hills like slow smoke, swallowing rooftops. Some afternoons, it was the only reason to wear a jacket. Aerospace jobs were golden tickets. Lockheed, Hughes, Douglas, if someone worked there, they were set. You didn't know exactly what they did, just that it sounded important. Rockets, satellites, planes. Dads came home smelling like oil and coffee, and little kids dreamed of flying, not for fun, but for a paycheck. Fallout shelters popped up like patio furniture in backyards. Cinder block bunkers stocked with canned beans and transistor radios. It didn't mean you were scared. It meant you were prepared. Kids played tag around them. Moms stored Christmas decorations in them. It was the Cold War, but suburban style. Backyard cookouts were formal affairs. Dad wore slacks and polished loafers to flip burgers. Moms brought Jell-O salads with pineapple rings. Hawaiian shirts were everywhere. The louder, the better. No one sat down until the flag was folded and someone had saluted the grill. It wasn't just dinner, it was presentation. Movie stars didn't hide back then. You'd see them on Hollywood Boulevard, running errands, wearing sunglasses, but no disguise. You'd nudge your friend, "Is that Gregory Peck?" and spend the next week telling everyone it was. Half the thrill was not being sure. The other half was pretending you were. People joke about L.A. traffic now, but it started long before freeways tangled the map. Even in the 50s, you'd sit bumper to bumper on Sunset and wonder where everyone was going. No honking, no road rage, just the slow realization that paradise came with brake lights, and you were still lucky to be there. The cliffs of Fort MacArthur were a wonderland for brave kids. The abandoned World War II bunkers still smelled of rust and salt. You'd scramble over them like they were playgrounds, dodging broken glass and imagining you were defending the coast. Adults said, "Stay away," but that only made them more interesting. Danger never looked so cool. When the Capitol Records Building opened in 1956, people actually stopped their cars to stare. It looked like a stack of vinyls punched into the sky. Everyone called it the Record Tower, and it felt like a promise that the music you loved was big, bold, and permanent. It still spins in memory. Grauman's Chinese theater premieres weren't just for stars. You'd see searchlights sweeping the night sky, drawing crowds like moths. Families piled into cars just to gawk from the sidewalk. Maybe you'd catch a glimpse of a gown or a limo door swinging shut. The glamour felt close enough to touch, if you craned your neck. Vine Street jazz clubs came alive when everything else was closing down. You'd walk past glowing neon, trailing cigarette smoke, and the sound of a trumpet riff slicing through the night. Inside, it was all low lights, snapping fingers, and secret smiles. Even if you couldn't afford cover, just listening outside was worth the trip. San Francisco's electric trolleybuses made a sound you never forgot. When the poles popped off the wires, sparks flew and drivers swore. Kids cheered. You'd sit by the window waiting for it to happen. It was part of the charm, part of the rhythm of a city always buzzing but never in a rush. Disneyland ticket books felt like treasure, A, B, C, D, and the coveted E tickets, which you always ran out of first. E was where the real magic lived, Matterhorn, Jungle Cruise, all the good stuff. You'd guard your last E like gold, then blow it with a grin. Even the tickets made memories. Googie diners didn't look like diners. They looked like spaceships. Angled roofs, blinking lights, chrome for days, pans, ships, tiny nailers. They served burgers and malts, sure, but it felt like you were eating in the future. On the Venice boardwalk, you could sit for a charcoal portrait while your parents sipped Cokes. The artist worked fast, hands smudged and eyes sharp. You tried not to smile too hard. When it was done, you looked almost famous, at least in pastel. Most people kept theirs rolled up in a closet forever. At LAX, you didn't need a ticket to feel the rush. You'd park near the fence, windows down, and watch DC-7s thunder overhead like gods of metal. The noise rattled your chest. You pointed. You waved. The engines roared so loud it felt like your ears were ringing from the future itself. Tourists went wild over palm trees. You'd see them taking photos of a single frond like it was a national monument. Locals barely noticed. But visitors, they'd point, pose, and act like they'd just spotted Bigfoot. That's when you realized, to them, California was already a postcard, and you were lucky enough to live in it. Someone always sighed and said, "We should have bought land in the valley when it was cheap." It became a running joke until it wasn't. Whole orange groves turned into neighborhoods overnight. What cost $5,000 now cost $15,000. And every old-timer had a story about the lot that got away. Every summer, somebody's uncle came back from the Central Valley with crates of peaches, not store stuff, real fruit, sun-warmed and bruised from the ride. You'd eat one over the sink while juice ran down your arms. The smell filled the whole house, and for a week it felt like you lived in a peach orchard. San Francisco kids built soapbox racers from whatever they could find. Dolores Street was steep and just dangerous enough to matter. They wore helmets made from pots and wheels stolen from junked baby carriages. No prizes, no parents, just bruised knees, bragging rights, and cardboard brakes that never worked when you needed them to. You could drive across the country, but something changed when you hit Route 66 and saw the L.A. skyline. Suddenly, it clicked. You made it. The billboards, the haze, the sound of 1,000 radios, all of it told you this was California. You rolled down the window and felt like a movie star. In the Central Valley, farmers swapped irrigation tips like family recipes, which pump to buy, how often to flood, what soil needed rest. It wasn't small talk. It was survival. Kids listened in like it was a secret code. The land was hot, dry, and stubborn. But if you learned its ways, it repaid you in gold. He works at Caltech could mean anything. Maybe chemistry, maybe rockets. No one understood, but everyone respected it. You'd nod like you got it, then whisper, "He's some kind of brain." Whatever he did, it sounded important, and it sounded like the future. At the La Brea tar pits, the earth bubbled like soup, thick, black, and weirdly alive. You'd lean over the railing and stare at trapped leaves and bones, pretending you saw a mammoth. The museum was cool, but the tar was cooler. Right there in the middle of traffic, the Ice Age was still cooking. Crossing into Tijuana for a day trip felt like entering another planet. You'd buy maracas, eat tacos, and come back with a sombrero you'd never wear again. The colors were loud, the smells even louder. Most of the stories you brought home were exaggerated, and that was half the fun. The Santa Monica Pier had a soul, and it lived in the Louvre Hippodrome's carousel. That 1922 merry-go-round creaked and whirled like a living memory. The paint was chipped, the mirrors fogged, and the calliope music wobbled. But nobody cared. You picked your favorite horse and felt like you were spinning through time. Clifton's cafeteria downtown was a trip. You'd stand under redwood murals and faux waterfalls just to get turkey and mashed potatoes. The line snaked forever, but the carved roast made it worth it. Kids stared at the taxidermy bear. Grown-ups talked in hushed voices. It was part cafeteria, part forest. July in California meant tomato trucks on Highway 99. They'd bounce down the road, scattering red fruit like confetti. You'd see cars swerve, kids collect, and moms groan about the mess. The road turned into a sauce-stained mosaic. No one called it litter. It was just another sign it was harvest time. In 1954, you'd hear the Penguins' Earth Angel crackle through the radio and feel like the whole world slowed down. L.A. teens called in to request it over and over. The DJ sounded smug. Parents said it was nonsense. But kids knew better. It wasn't just a song. It was the sound of falling in love. Every family had a cousin who moved to Hollywood to be an actress. Sometimes she wrote, sometimes she didn't. You'd drive past an extra on set and wonder if it was her. Maybe she made it, maybe she didn't. But in California, the dream was enough to keep everyone watching. Hughes Aircraft in Culver City was a factory that felt like a fortress. Ex-pilots found work there. Men who'd flown B-17s now building radar or guidance systems. The place was enormous. You could lose a truck inside, but it paid well. And to kids, it meant your dad worked on secret stuff. Earthquakes were California's boogeyman. Everyone acted cool. Oh, that? Just a tremor. But when one hit and the china cabinet rattled, nobody smiled. You'd run outside, barefoot, heart pounding, then pretend it was no big deal. Until the next one. Then you'd wonder again if maybe this time it wasn't so small after all. Some mornings, the smog rolled in like fog, but heavier. It stung your nose and turned the sun a weird orange. Teachers would close the windows and skip recess. Nobody called it pollution. It was just the air in Los Angeles. You coughed, complained, and kept playing anyway. That's just how it was. See's candies came in that black and white box, and somehow just holding it felt fancy. You didn't ask what flavor, you poked the bottom. Everyone had a favorite, and everyone accused someone else of stealing the last one. The box always disappeared faster than you'd planned, and nobody ever remembered who ate the nut clusters. Someone swore Rita Hayworth once lived down the block, probably in that bungalow with the roses. Nobody could prove it, but the rumor never died. You walked past it slower just in case. Even the grown-ups liked repeating it. In California, almost every house came with a story, whether it was true or not. The first color TV on the street turned one neighbor's living room into a Saturday destination. Everyone piled in to watch the ball game. The colors were off. Grass looked lime green, but nobody cared. It was like watching through a stained glass window. You could pack up the car, head to Yosemite without a reservation, and still snag a good campsite. It wasn't crowded yet. The bears were bold, the air smelled like pine, and nobody locked their ice chests. Kids climbed rocks all day and slept hard. You didn't need an itinerary, just gas money and snacks. Before Riverside got a real speedway, the drag races happened on old airstrips and back roads. Teenagers showed up with souped-up Chevys and more guts than common sense. Engines howled, tires screamed, and someone always had a stopwatch. The cops knew, of course, but half the time they just shook their heads and let it fly. Every driveway seemed to have a half-finished boat in it. Some were just plywood dreams, others nearly seaworthy. Dads would tinker on weekends, measuring twice and cutting wrong anyway. Kids helped, sort of, Nobody questioned it. In the suburbs, building a boat, even if it never floated, meant you were building something more than wood. In Watsonville, strawberry season hit hard. Pickers bent low in the sun, red-stained fingers and backs sore by noon. You could smell the fields from the highway. Trucks rumbled past, stacked with flats. Sometimes you'd get a fresh one, still warm and dusty. And just for a second, it tasted like California itself. Laguna Beach felt like a sleepy postcard. Stores closed midday for no reason but heat. Artists painted in the shade, waves rolled in slow, and the sidewalks emptied like someone rang a bell. You could nap on a bench, hear nothing but seagulls, and forget you lived in a state known for speed. Olvera Street was a riot of color and smell. Leather belts, painted skulls, sizzling taquitos. Mariachis wandered, songs floating between stalls. You begged your parents for maracas or a tiny sombrero. It felt old and alive at the same time, like history wasn't something you read. It was something you could eat. When KFWB flipped to top 40 in 1958, the soundtrack of the street changed overnight. Suddenly, it was all Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and Elvis, loud, fast, and impossible to ignore. Parents groaned. Teenagers danced. The radio wars had begun. If it had a backbeat, it was blaring from somebody's dashboard by sundown. Mission-style stucco homes started popping up miles from any real mission. Rounded arches, red tile roofs, and fake wrought iron lamps. They looked like something from a Zorro movie, but they were new, clean, and full of promise. California was reinventing itself one block at a time, and everybody wanted to live in the movie version. Kids took cardboard, not sleds, not boards, just cardboard, and raced down the Guadalupe dunes in Pismo Beach like daredevils. The ride was fast, sandy, and full of wipeouts. You came back scratched, sunburned, and grinning. It didn't matter that your sled fell apart halfway down. What mattered was that you tried again. The AM radio dial was Dad's domain. Driving Highway 1 at sunset, he'd fine-tune it to his favorite station, fingers always fiddling. Static faded, music rose, Sinatra, maybe Nat King Cole. The road unwound beside the sea, the sky turned gold, and for a few perfect miles, the whole family just listened. The Hollywood sign didn't have fences or cameras back then. You could hike right up and touch it. The metal was hotter than you'd expect. It creaked in the wind, and everyone carved their initials into the wood supports. No one stopped you. For a moment, you felt like you owned the whole hillside. L.A.'s Broadway glittered at night, not clean, not polished, but alive. Neon signs flickered half-lit, bulbs buzzed and blinked. Shop windows flashed dresses and radios. You walked faster, not scared, just aware. Everything felt a little electric. It was a street that never quite slept and never pretended to be anything but itself. That aunt with the pink stucco apartment? Hers always smelled like aqua net and powder. The couch was wrapped in plastic. The carpet was mint green, and she had cocktail glasses that never got used. You felt like you were inside a perfume bottle. Even the ice cubes seemed to sparkle louder in her place. After 1951, avocado growers started pushing them hard. Suddenly, They were the backyard tree. Exotic, they said. Neighbors planted them next to clotheslines and patio chairs. The fruit took forever to ripen, and kids hated the texture, but it felt modern. Like a future full of guacamole was somehow the California dream. The saltwater pool at Avalon had kids diving for coins while tourists watched from beach chairs. The water stung your eyes. The coins sank fast, but if you were quick and a little reckless, you might score enough for a Coke. It was a game of pride and lung capacity played all afternoon. San Onofre surfers swapped shark stories like trading cards. Some were true, some were pure fantasy. 6 feet, black eyes, swam right under me. You nodded, impressed. The beach smelled like coconut oil and kelp. Waxed boards leaned against driftwood. Whether or not the sharks were real, the legends definitely were. Griffith Park pony rides were a rite of passage. Someone always filmed it with an 8mm Kodachrome. Wobbly frame, too much sun, and a final tumble off the saddle. You'd watch it later, giggling while the projector clicked. The pony looked bored. You looked terrified, but you asked to go again anyway. In Monterey, fishermen sold Dungeness crabs straight off the docks. You'd walk past stacks of traps and fish guts, and suddenly there'd be a guy with a cigarette and a bucket of dinner. He'd weigh it in a rusty scale, toss it in newspaper, and wink. Best $5 you ever spent. Clark Gable grocery shopping was a shock. You spotted him in the frozen aisle at the A&P, looking just like a regular guy. Except he wasn't. Nobody said a word. You stared at cereal boxes like they were fascinating. But everyone knew, and you'd be telling that story for the next 30 years. Hearst Castle sounded like something out of a fairy tale, and it kind of was. Friends who made the drive called it California's Xanadu. Gold ceilings, indoor pools, statues galore. You planned to go someday. Maybe, if the car made it. Meanwhile, you settled for postcards and the stories that made it seem unreal. The Salton Sea was supposed to be the next big thing. Marinas, resorts, palm-lined dreams. People bought land like it was beachfront gold. For a while it worked. Fishing, boating, neon motel signs. Then came the salt, the stink, the collapse. But some folks still remember it the way it almost was. Driving through Gilroy, the garlic fields hit you before the road sign. It wasn't just strong. It was everywhere. Windows up, vents closed, still no escape. Locals didn't even flinch. To them it meant work, harvest, and pride. But to outsiders, it smelled like someone dumped spaghetti night across the entire valley. Napa wasn't wine country back then. It was farm country with grapes. The wineries were family-run, just a shed, a jug, and a handshake. Tasting rooms were card tables, labels were hand-stuck. You didn't sip, you drank. Nobody said notes of cherry. You said not bad, and bought a gallon for Sunday spaghetti. The Giant Dipper at the Santa Cruz Beach boardwalk creaked like it was falling apart. That was part of the thrill. You could hear the screams before you saw the drop. It felt faster than it was. Wind in your face, stomach in your throat. And afterward, you swore you were 10 feet taller. Long after the groves were bulldozed, citrus murals stayed. They popped up on diner walls, bright oranges against blue skies, old trucks beneath leafy branches. The fruit was gone, but the memory stayed framed in paint and formica. You'd order a slice of pie and stare at the past, pretending you could still smell blossoms. Veterans came home and got to work. The GI Bill gave them loans, and California gave them space. Tract homes shot up like daisies, small yards, big dreams, all laid out on former farmland. Every block looked the same, but to the folks moving in, it looked like progress, finally within reach. For the Santa Claus Lane Parade, you staked your curb early. Blankets, thermoses, maybe a flashlight. Hollywood Boulevard turned to magic. Floats glittered with thousands of bulbs. Movie stars waved stiffly. Kids bounced on their toes. You stayed past bedtime sticky from candied apples just to see Santa glide by like a celebrity in red velvet. Car hops on roller skates were smoother than they had any right to be. Balancing burgers, malts, and a tray that hooked to your window, it was performance art. Bobs, tinies, anywhere with neon and a decent shake. You tipped in dimes, spilled fries, and tried not to blush when the skates rolled up. Lake Tahoe looked like a sheet of glass. You'd toss a pebble and watch it sink forever, convinced you could still see it halfway down. The water was cold, the sun was high, and every picture came out overexposed. If you squinted just right, you could almost believe the bottom didn't exist. Big Bear trips started with no plan and ended with strange combinations. Sunburned shoulders, snow in your pockets, and maybe a flat tire. You'd leave in shorts and come back in mittens. The mountain air felt sharper, clearer. It was one of those places that made you forget the freeway was only hours away. The Catalina swimsuit catalog promised Hollywood-approved styles, which meant one-pieces with drama and shoulder straps built like architecture. You circled your pick in ballpoint and mailed the order. Weeks later, it showed up. Too tight, too shiny, and perfect. You wore it once at the beach and twice in the mirror. That rooftop donut? Impossible to miss. Opened in 1953, the Big Donut Drive-In near LAX looked like it belonged on another planet. You pointed it out every time you passed, even if you'd seen it 100 times. Downtown department stores were full-on experiences. Doormen in uniforms opened the door like you were royalty. Elevators had attendants and brass gates that clanged shut. You could buy gloves, a toaster, and a milkshake in one trip. And if you didn't come home with a box tied in string, you felt like you forgot something. Everyone had an opinion about the Dodgers. They'll never leave Brooklyn. They'd never play in a stadium that small. Then they came. 1958. It was official. L.A. was a real baseball city now. Some old-timers still grumbled. But by the first home run at the Coliseum, the whole town had switched allegiance and bought peanuts. The Santa Ana winds didn't just blow, they charged. Windows rattled, doors slammed, and moods shifted. You'd wake up with your hair standing funny and the air dry as toast. Papers flew down sidewalks. Teachers snapped at kids. Even dogs acted weird. Everyone blamed it on the winds, like they were alive. Newsboys barked headlines on corners. Herald Express, Chronicle, Examiner. The papers were thick. The ink rubbed off on your fingers, and the front pages always looked dramatic. Bold type, grainy photos, war updates, scandal. If you didn't buy one, you still heard the news shouted into the air like it was part of the weather. Sunset Boulevard had its own game show, Queen for a Day. You'd see women lined up down the block hoping for their shot. A washer-dryer, a vacation, maybe just applause. It was half soap opera, half fairy tale. Some cried on stage, some smiled through nerves. The prize wasn't just stuff. It was being seen. Gold mine tours in the Sierras came with two smells, cold rock and something faintly like dynamite. You ducked into the tunnels, flashlight barely cutting through the dark. The guide spun stories of fortune and failure. Kids touched the walls like treasure might still be hiding in there. Sometimes you kind of believed it. You didn't need a fancy boat. Someone had an outboard and borrowed skis, and suddenly you were water skiing on the Sacramento River. The rope burned your hands, the water slapped hard, and you never quite stood up straight. But for those few seconds, you felt like you were flying, soaked, screaming, and thrilled. The Third and Fairfax Farmers Market was a blur of smells and voices. Moms steered kids between crates of produce and donut stalls. Vendors handed out orange slices. You might get a pickle on a stick or a hot tamale. Even if you left with nothing, the whole place clung to you. Garlic, sugar, sunlight. In Palm Springs, you'd stand outside a bar pretending to wait for someone, really just hoping Frank Sinatra might step out for a cigarette. Rumors flew. He's here. He's staying at the Racket Club. You never saw him, but you told people you almost did. That was enough. Jell-O salads from Sunset Magazine were science projects in disguise. Lime with cottage cheese, orange with shredded carrots, or, worst of all, green with tuna. Every dinner party had one, proudly wobbled to the table. You didn't have to like it. You just had to eat enough to smile when you said, The hula hoop craze hit in the summer of '58 like a spinning freight train. Wham-O couldn't make them fast enough. Kids lined up outside Woolworths, clutching change. Lawns turned into arenas. Hips swiveled, hoops clattered. It wasn't about skill. It was about not being the one who dropped it first. The original Bob's Big Boy in Burbank was Sunday tradition. You'd show up after church, hair still combed, stomach growling. Booths were red vinyl. Burgers came tall, and the statue out front waved like he knew you. Kids climbed it. Parents ignored them. And the milkshakes had that perfect metal cup chill. The Catalina boat ride made you seasick. The island sun gave you a burn. And somehow it was still perfect. You fed seagulls from the stern, bought saltwater taffy, and got sand in your shoes. On the way home, the water glowed, and everyone agreed they'd do it again. Highway 1 had barns like movie props, weathered wood, rusted roofs, leaning just enough to look poetic. Families stopped for photos without saying why. You'd pose with your brother in front of a crooked fence and forget about it. Later, flipping through slides, it became the picture everyone remembered. The postcard came from Humboldt County. Moved for the fog and redwoods, it said, and they stayed You didn't blame them. Up there, trees were taller, the roads were quieter, and the rest of the world felt far away. It wasn't just a new place. It was the old California, untouched, waiting. If that hit home, the next stop's even more familiar. Let's head straight into the 70s